Hey, I'm Bill Marion, just outside of Helen, Georgia, and this is A Nose for Life.
Carolyn and I visit a lot of mountain towns all over the U.S. All of them are unique, but Helen, Georgia is like having the charm of Bavaria in the heart of Georgia's Blue Ridge Mountains in the Chattahoochee National Forest. And when you visit Helen, you really do feel like you might be in Bavaria, unless you go in the summer, and the hot temperatures will remind you quickly that you're not in southern Germany. This mountain town is located in the northeast part of Georgia along the Chattahoochee River. At one time, Helen was a logging town, but when the logging business dried up, Helen reinvented itself as an accessible Bavarian-themed tourist town, and in 1969, city officials rezoned the entire city to adopt a southern German style for every building. The whole town tries to sell you on the fact that you're in Bavaria, and when it comes to the architecture, it works.
Now, everything in Helen, Georgia has a southern Germany or Bavarian theme to it. All of the condos, all of the hotels have the cutest Bavarian look to them, and they look pretty amazing. Now, I'm not sponsored by any of these condos. In fact, I'm not showing their name intentionally because I don't want to get sued. But at the same time, just to give you a kind of a sample of just about what everything looks like here in Helen, if you look at the condos behind me, they're really nice.
In addition to lots of shopping and food, there is a lot of hiking around Helen, especially around the Unicoi State Park, which is a pretty big deal. And there are lots of beautiful waterfalls. And in the mountains, where there are waterfalls, there are creeks and small rivers, and where there are creeks and small rivers, you know there's tubing. In fact, in Helen, Georgia, there's a lot of tubing, and yet that's not really what this video is all about. You know, when I first started making this video, I was torn. The fact is, Carolyn and I only spent about 3 hours in Helen, Georgia. We were on our way back from another video location about the Georgia Guidestones. If you're on a computer, that link should appear right now. And I will say this about the Georgia Guidestones, they're interesting, but it's not an all-day kind of thing. So we wanted to create another video as well, and we chose Helen, Georgia. During the editing process, I didn't believe it was fair to release our video about Helen, and here's why. We had been up since 5 a.m., and by the time we got to Helen, it was extremely hot and pretty busy. But it wasn't just because we were worn out when we got there. I've only been to Helen one other time, and honestly, it was just a drive-through. Carolyn's never been to Helen, so it was our first time there together. We simply didn't realize how much there is in Helen, and there wasn't enough time. Furthermore, we had to be back home the very next day, and we simply couldn't dive into Helen the way one should to appreciate what any tourist town has to offer. Our channel is growing, and in part because we continue to improve, and a part of that process is making sure that our information is correct. And that being said, you have to remember our mission statement, or the mission statement for A Nose for Life. You know, the channel you're watching right now. Simply stated, our content wants to reflect the best in people we meet, the best places we go, and each other. It doesn't mean that every place we go is perfect, but we choose to show the better parts. And we didn't feel like we could do that with such a brief stay in Helen. So while this video does include information about Helen, Georgia, it's not about Helen, Georgia entirely. But believe it or not, this has turned out to be a great opportunity to dive into a topic that's puzzled me for some time, and that's how Germany, or Bavaria, has such a tremendous influence on Appalachian tourism. It's true, you find it all over the mountains. This is a video in which comments are not only welcomed, but strongly encouraged, because you may have pivotal information that I simply can't find. I love reading additional verifiable information and informed opinions about this subject, and you don't have to inbox me, you can just put it in the comments. And just a small disclaimer, I am completely aware that the Bavarian influence is not in any way, shape, or form limited to the Appalachian Mountains. The architecture is quite beautiful, so it's all over America for a variety of reasons. Furthermore, the Bavarian influence does not saturate the Appalachian Mountains completely. You just see it a lot, mainly around touristy areas. This video is to provide information and even ask questions about the relationship or early marketing decisions that went into choosing a Bavarian style over something else. And I don't think the answers are as easy as one may imagine. As I begin my research, I can already tell you there's only one case in which the decision was made by a city to go Bavarian, and that was Helen, Georgia in 1969. But what about Gatlinburg and the other small shopping areas that adopt the same kind of theme, maybe unofficially? Why did they do that? Does Gatlinburg embrace a Bavarian influence at all? But first, let's talk about the weather.
So Helen is more of a driving town than a walking around town. I mean, it's laid out over a large area. You're kind of in the foothills to the mountains here, so it's kind of hilly terrain too. Now we park because, hey, we need the exercise and it's good for us. But people, compared to Gatlinburg, Pigeon Forge, Cherokee, and some of the other videos we've made, people are in their car a lot more going from one destination to another. My theory on that, it's hot.
Let's face it, if you're from the South, it's something we talk about often, and that's the weather. And normally it's how hot it is outside. But I'm not sure we're aware of how our climate affects tourists from the northern Midwest or Northeast. And it's true that when most Southerners visit the northern Midwest or Northeast, we freeze. When it comes to Helen, Georgia, I think it's good to remind people that it is in Georgia, and Georgia's summers are unforgiving. And yes, it might be slightly cooler in Helen than, let's say, Macon or Augusta, Georgia, but not by much. One thing is for sure, on average, it's cooler in any part of Germany in the summer than Helen, and sometimes by 10 degrees. Even Helen's higher elevation doesn't assist with the heat like it might in Gatlinburg, Tennessee, and especially Cherokee, North Carolina. Both locations are farther north than Helen, far enough to matter when it comes to weather. In my opinion, that's why there's a lot of emphasis on water activity in Helen, and by water activity I mean tubing, water parks, and so on. If you watch my other videos, you'll notice that I mentioned several times that Appalachian tourist locations always have tubing, kayaking, fishing, and so on. It's the benefit of being in the mountains. That's also why many people in Helen talk about October being the best time of year to visit. And while I think Helen has its advantages any time of year, unless you're used to the heat, I would also recommend Helen when it's just a bit cooler. But if you find yourself in Helen in the middle of the hottest part of the summer, in the mountains, there's always a way to beat the heat, and Helen is no exception. One quick note about Germany's weather. There are times in which the temperatures can reach 95 Fahrenheit, but it's rare. And during the summer, there are often breaks in the weather. Some people compare Germany's weather to Michigan weather. That's true to an extent, but Germany doesn't have to deal with as much extreme cold.
Now, one of the things I already love about being here in Helen, Georgia is that they have a welcome center. A few videos ago that I did about Cherokee, North Carolina, I mentioned how I loved their welcome center and their public restrooms. Well, it's the same thing here in Helen. They have a very nice welcome center. The staff is extremely friendly. They are extremely knowledgeable. So I recommend when you come to Helen, stop by the visitor center first. And there's also a lot of information about cabin rentals and hotels, and of course a things to do list, which is pretty long here in Helen.
One such place is Hansel and Gretel's Candy Kitchen. First, I'm grateful that we were allowed to film inside, but I'm always grateful when Carolyn and I are welcomed into any establishment and greeted with a friendly smile and a warm heart. And this was the case in the amazing candy store. When it comes to chocolate, I don't think this place can be beat, and most of their menu is made in-house, and thankfully they make a lot more than just fudge, which is what I'm kind of used to in most mountain tourist destinations. Hansel and Gretel go all out, and we certainly enjoyed the store. But speaking of Hansel and Gretel, most people assume that the story has German origins, and there are a lot of good reasons for this. But the truth is that the history of the story of Hansel and Gretel is a lot more complicated than you realize, and it's a lot darker. If you're interested, I've included an interesting link in the description.
So sitting here in this replica of Bavaria, I can't help but to remember a young Chevy Chase in National Lampoon's European Vacation. If you've seen it, how about a comment? Big Ben, Parliament. Like any touristy destination, Helen, Georgia is always going to be more crowded on the weekends. This weekend especially, we're here about a week before the first day of school, or the last weekend before the kids go back to school officially. So everybody's trying to get that last vacation, and of course football season is coming. But they say the most crowded time here is in October, because being that this is a Bavarian themed town, it will be Oktoberfest. And from what I understand, traffic is at a standstill, and it's a month-long party.
When it comes to shopping, Carolyn and I only scratched the surface. After all, we were only in Helen a couple of hours, and we didn't spend a lot of time shopping. There are some things you want to keep in mind. Helen seems to be divided into two sections. One section is more of a walking section, kind of like Gatlinburg, with well-defined Bavarian themes. But the shopping is diverse, and there seems to be plenty of places to get a tattoo. There are lots of condo rentals, and from what I've been told, the condos are pretty amazing. There's a great golf course in Helen. Links are in the description, and we saw at least one mini golf or putt-putt course. There's so much more to do in Helen that's not mentioned here, which is why I've listed several links in the description if you're interested in planning a vacation to Helen. I will say, the condos look amazing.
Have I mentioned that there's tubing here yet?
If you're still with me through that rather long introduction, let's establish what we mean by Bavaria. Bavaria is the largest state within the southeast part of Germany. The geography reminds one of the foothills of any mountain chain within the Appalachian Mountains. There are high plateaus and average-sized mountains within Bavaria. One may imagine that in the most southern parts of Bavaria, like the foothills of Appalachia, one might have views of the Great Mountains in Austria. That might be a generalization, but when most non-Germans think of Germany, they think of Bavaria. But the truth is that Bavaria may have more in common common with its neighbors in Austria and Switzerland than with the rest of Germany, at least culturally. If there is such a thing as the stereotypical beer-drinking, lederhosen-wearing German, you would find him in South Bavaria near Austria or the Alps. So far, South Bavaria seems to have a great deal in common with the people in or around the Appalachian Mountains, minus the lederhosen. Bavarians are proud of their traditions and their roots, much like the mountain folks here in the U.S., and just like those of us from the Appalachian Mountains, Bavarians speak a little English. On a side note, if you've been a subscriber for a long time, you know when I lose my concentration a little, I slip into my Appalachian dialect. It's like speaking another language.
And one thing is for sure, and you can't say this about every tourist destination, and this is a fact, is that in Helen, everybody so far in all the stores we've been into and window shopped or whatever the case is, they've been extremely friendly and informative and just absolutely amazing. So this is a place where you can come, and people, you know, the storekeepers here, they want your business. They treat you like they want your business. And I can't say that all of the touristy destinations Carol and I visit are like that, but Helen seems to really appreciate the fact that you're here.
These similarities are interesting, at least culturally, but it doesn't seem to answer any questions. Yes, some Bavarians migrated to the Appalachian Mountains, but there doesn't seem to be a direct connection to Bavarian migration leading to a great Bavarian influence, at least not yet. And by the way, when I'm referring to a Bavarian influence, I'm referring to the architecture, not necessarily imitating Bavaria, with Helen, of course, being the exception. While the style is easy to identify, I found it extremely hard to label based on my search, and maybe somebody can help me in the comments. But the style most people associate with the Bavarian style seems to be identified as the chalet. Now, there's a German word for it, but I'm not going to give that a try. The truth is that Germany's architectural style is extremely diverse. So how did Helen come up with its Bavarian look? Well, like I said, the timber industry died in Helen, and the federal government had just established the Chattahoochee National Forest, which gave Helen a little boost in its local economy, but it didn't last long. So, two local businessmen, Peach Hodkinson and Jimmy Wilkins, turned to a local artist, John Colick, to reinvent the town. It just so happens that Colick spent a long time in Bavaria. Colick is credited for the grand vision of bringing the Alps to the Appalachians. And when you visit Helen today, it's easy to see that Colick's vision is a success. And I have to be completely honest, my source for this information is the Cedar Creek Cabin Rentals. Links in the description. I'm sure Cedar Creek Cabin Rentals rent some amazing cabins, but they're not exactly the historical journal, you know. They also cite the fact that the area was influenced by a German population at some point. I'm still trying to find that information, and maybe you can help and put it in the comments. But essentially, Helen just decided to be Bavarian, and it seems to have worked out for them. But that doesn't explain the rest of Appalachia that imitates the same style on occasion.
The makeup of Helen, like who Helen is as far as who they are as a town, well, they're extremely diverse. And that includes their restaurants, diversity, everything from Thai to Mexican food. Of course, you have German food too, but I haven't seen as much German food as I have other things. The tourists that are here, from what I understand, tourists that come here, they're from the Atlanta area, and that seems to resonate with the license plates that I'm seeing. So this is kind of a vacation hub for Atlanta, but it's a very diverse town, lots of happy people, and lots of tubing. Have I mentioned that there's tubing here yet?
Obviously, time won't let us explore every single tourist location in the mountains, but we can investigate a major town, Gatlinburg, for its German origins. And this may be foreign to some people, especially if you're a younger listener, but there was a time in which Gatlinburg had a German kind of theme going on, even an amazing ski lift and ski resort, which is still there, but not so German influenced. But Gatlinburg seems to have abandoned its German mimicry, except during Oktoberfest, and out comes the beer and lederhosen, and chewing tobacco. Gatlinburg's original name was White Oak Flats. It was Robert Gatlin, who ran the local store and the post office, who renamed the town Gatlinburg. But one thing is for sure, Gatlinburg and its surrounding area was heavily influenced by Europeans, particularly Germans, who assisted in building some amazing long-standing homes and barns. In fact, there are several structures that remain to this day in the Gatlinburg area that were most definitely influenced by German ingenuity. But still, the name of the town isn't exactly German other than the Berg. I mean, it's the last name of someone who history records was a pretty mean guy.
Okay, I need somebody to help me out in the comments here. So I'm digging Helen. Helen, this is the first time Carol and I have been here. You know, I'm digging Helen. We're doing a recon trip for a future family vacation maybe. So we're just kind of in and out today, sharing this video and this adventure with you. again, it's a Bavarian theme, but I don't understand. Are there cacti in Germany? I lived in Germany when I was a kid for 2 years, but I don't remember seeing a single cactus. And there's like a whole big pile of cacti behind me. So are there like wild cacti growing in Bavaria? Somebody help me out there.
From everything I can find and everything I've read, in most cases, in several cases, the methods that were used to build homes and barns by European immigrants, particularly the German and Dutch immigrants, seems to have simply stuck around and then was adopted by mountain living. But it's Helen, Georgia that takes it to the limit. Making no bones about it, they've declared themselves the Alps of Appalachia. And I say so be it. But to me, to make it real, I think I'll have to visit Helen when it's snowing or really, really cold.
Throughout history, there have been people from all over the world who have immigrated to the Appalachian Mountains to find their home and a new way of life. And of course, these amazing people have brought their skills with them, including people from Germany, and that means South Bavaria. But unless somebody like you can prove me wrong in the comments, it seems that most of the mountains of Appalachia adopt a Bavarian style or architecture and even food in some cases, sort of as a marketing ploy, because a lot of Americans, we don't travel as much outside of the United States as much as Europeans travel to the United States, which is a shame, by the way, and it has a lot to do with the purchasing power of the dollar and how easy it is for Americans to travel. And I'm one of those people who wish we could travel all the time because I love the world and I think the world is an amazing place. But since a lot of Americans can't get to Europe and they can't get to Bavaria and see the Alps or see the amazing people in Germany, we would like just a little taste of Bavaria, especially during Oktoberfest when a lot of people flock to these little American German-like towns for festivals. And so it's not so much that Gatlinburg really is a German town or that Helen is a German town. In fact, it's very obvious that Helen, even though they get an A for effort in making their town look like a Bavarian town, but the roots of Gatlinburg and the roots of Helen, Georgia, well, neither town have their roots in any type of particular German immigration. So it's not like you can say, well, these two communities were settled exclusively by Germans, and yes, there are areas in the mountains that we could cover some other time that can say that they were exclusively pioneered and settled by Germans or by the Dutch or whoever in Europe, but not necessarily Gatlinburg and Helen. In fact, Helen has done a great job at being very honest that they are mimicking a town in Bavaria. And Gatlinburg, it seems that over time has sort of toyed with the idea of being a Bavarian alpine sort of town, but Gatlinburg has sort of morphed into its own thing these days. So in making generalizations, and that's what we're doing today, we're just making generalizations. We're not necessarily stating historical fact all the way through and through, but in making a generalization, we can honestly say that there is no connection between Bavaria and the mountains of Appalachia. At least no connection that isn't everywhere across the United States. I mean, after all, it's a real cozy architecture. It looks real homey and real farmy and just real salt of the earth kind of people, which is what Americans are, you know, but you could find that same type of influence probably in England and in their architecture that would invoke the same type of feelings, or all across Europe for that matter. So the decision to use Bavarian architecture was definitely a marketing choice. Because I gotta be honest, I always thought Gatlinburg when I was a kid was somehow this little German town, but it's like really not. By the way, my name is Bill Marion. I want to thank you so much for watching this. I hope that you're a subscriber to this channel. If not, I want to give you the opportunity and a personal invitation right now to subscribe to this channel. And of course, click the little bell for notifications. Listen, the only way that we can grow this channel is if you share this video and other videos on any social media platform. Again, my name is Bill Marion, and this is A Nose for Life. Thank you for watching. Have I mentioned that there's tubing here yet?
If you have some time, check out some of these other videos.